A lot of truck drivers out there think that if they're running intrastate, federal DOT regulations don't matter to them at all. But that's not always true. And that's just one of the DOT myths that drivers still believe today. There are so many things that drivers hear out on the road about DOT inspections, about FMCSA rules and compliance. Things drivers hear at truck stops, things they hear from other drivers, things drivers read online, on the internet. But the problem is a lot of those things simply just are not true. And believing the wrong information can create serious problems during DOT inspections. So today we're going to be breaking down 5 DOT myths that truckers out there still believe, but more importantly, we're going to be breaking down the real facts behind them. Because once you understand the reality behind these myths, you can avoid mistakes that end up costing drivers time, money, and even violations. And stick around until the end because the last myth on the list is one that I hear drivers talk about constantly. Before we jump on into myth number 1, I'm curious about something. Drop down in the comments below, what is the biggest DOT myth that you've heard from another driver that you found out was not true? Because some of the things drivers believe about DOT rules can be pretty surprising. Alright, myth number 1, personal conveyance can be used to finish up a load. I've heard this several times out on the road, and this needs to be talked about. So one of the biggest myths out there is where drivers believe that personal conveyance can be used as a loophole to finish up work. So you're probably going to hear drivers say things like this: just switch to personal conveyance and finish up your trip, bro. But that's not how personal conveyance works, PC as we all know it as. Personal conveyance is meant for personal use, not business use. Examples include things like driving from a truck stop to a restaurant, driving from a shipper to the closest nearby parking location after being unloaded, or relocating the truck for personal reasons while off duty. What personal conveyance is not meant for is advancing the load or continuing toward a delivery location. You can't do that. When drivers use personal conveyance to just keep moving freight, that can actually be viewed as a misuse of personal conveyance. And during an inspection, misuse of personal conveyance almost always raises questions about that driver's logs. So don't do it. Now, myth number 2 is another one I hear drivers talk about and argue about constantly, especially on the online forums. Which, in my free time, I like looking up trucking stuff, industry stuff, trucking news. It's fun, okay? And this one we're going to talk about, myth number 2, involves something that drivers think is going to protect them during DOT inspections. But in reality, it doesn't. So that myth is going to be a clean inspection sticker means that you won't be inspected again or you can't be inspected again. That clean inspection sticker I'm talking about is going to be the CVSA decal. Some drivers believe that if they receive a clean inspection and get a CVSA decal, they won't be inspected again for a very long time. You'll hear drivers say things like, I just got inspected last week so DOT won't bother me again, or, oh, I have a CVSA sticker so that means you can't inspect me because this inspector thought that my truck was good. But that's just not how it works. A CVSA sticker shows that vehicle or combination may have passed an inspection with flying colors at that point in time when that inspector did the inspection. But like we all know, things can change. Your lights can be good, then you drive down the road, next thing you know, your ID lights are out. So even if you have a sticker, if an officer sees a visual violation, there's still an enforcement campaign underway. So the vehicle can be inspected yet again. And this is something drivers don't always realize. Because like I said, conditions change, lights burn out, equipment wears down, securement can loosen. So even with the CVSA decal, drivers still need to stay on top of vehicle condition and make sure things are in tip-top shape. Quick question for my truckers watching this. Have you ever been inspected twice within a very short period of time? Let us know down in the comments what happened and what that was all about. Myth number 3 is a super educational one, and you need to understand this one. People think that intrastate drivers don't have to follow FMCSA rules at all. This myth comes up constantly. Some drivers genuinely believe that if they only operate within one state and they don't leave or they aren't leaving, that all federal rules don't apply to them ever. But the reality is a little bit more complicated than that. Depending on the type of operation, intrastate drivers can still fall under federal regulations. This can include things like commercial motor vehicle weight thresholds, any interstate commerce involvement, and the type of freight being transported. The key point here is that interstate operations don't automatically mean that federal regulations just disappear and mean nothing at all. And that's something many drivers out there misunderstand heavily. Now, the next myth we're going to discuss is one that actually causes a lot of frustration between drivers. Because many drivers out there believe that once a violation is fixed, that it no longer matters. But that's, again, not exactly how it works. Myth number 4, if you fix a violation, it no longer matters. Drivers sometimes believe that if they fix a violation right after an inspection, then that violation and everything else no longer matters. For example, replacing a light after a DOT inspection, fixing a tire later on, and repairing equipment equipment the following day. While correcting the issue is absolutely important, the violation itself can still be documented. And that documentation can still impact things like carrier safety scores, compliance records, and safety tracking systems. That's why staying ahead of maintenance issues is always the better strategy. Even if you fix something after that inspector gives you that inspection report, remember to read that inspection report properly and follow all the procedures on that inspection report. So throw your name on there or signature. Whoever repairs it throws a signature on there, and you have to handle that paperwork properly. You don't just grab that paperwork and keep it in your truck. And honestly, fixing these issues before they become violations save drivers a ton of headache. What's the most common violation you've all seen drivers get hit with roadside? And I ask this because it's really interesting to see what you truckers out there are seeing out there on the roadside, because you may be seeing things that I don't get to see every single day. We've made it to myth number 5. Another myth drivers sometimes believe is that inspections only happen at weigh stations. And this is actually pretty common. When I'm patrolling and I pull a truck over, it's like they're seeing a UFO or something. They are very surprised, and a lot of them sometimes say, "This isn't a weigh station, why are you stopping me? Like, how am I getting stopped right now?" So that shows me that they clearly don't understand how things work. Inspections can happen at many different locations. Roadside inspections, portable site inspections, interstate inspections, parking areas, safety blitz events, and other enforcement locations. Now, this is why commercial motor vehicle enforcement uses multiple inspection methods, because relying on only fixed weigh stations would make it a free-for-all for so many drivers out there. And let's face it, even though we patrol all over the place and we have weigh stations, there are certain drivers out there that still try their hardest to avoid weigh stations. Again, so imagine if we only had weigh stations open and did zero patrol or did no state roads or anything like that. Portable scales and roadside inspections help to ensure compliance across the road network. Now, when you start looking at all 5 of these myths together, you start to see a pattern. And that pattern is many of these myths are shared by word of mouth between truck drivers over the years. And a lot of the times that information is just not accurate at all. So let's quickly recap the 5 DOT myths that we talked about today. Myth number 1 was that personal conveyance can be used to finish up a load, which is false. You can't use PC for that. Myth number 2 was that a CVSA decal means that you can't be inspected again, which again is false. Myth number 3 is that interstate drivers do not have to follow federal rules at all. Again, this is false. Myth number 4 was that fixing a violation later means that violation no longer matters. False. And myth number 5 was that inspections only happen at weigh stations, which you and I know is completely false. So the reality behind all of these myths is that understanding the actual rules and expectations helps drivers avoid unnecessary problems during DOT inspections. Now I'm curious about something. What is the biggest long-standing, currently standing DOT myth that you have ever heard? Drop it down in the comments, because I may actually use some of these to put it into a future video. If you want real-world breakdowns about DOT inspections, FMCSA updates, trucking industry insights, and trucking news, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of those things. Because this channel is all about helping truck drivers stay informed, helping them get better educated, and helping them stay more squared away. Until next video, stay safe, keep rolling.